It's a new year, so I thought this would be the perfect time to highlight who I think the best teams in women's basketball are. For honorable mentions, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Duke, and Ohio State are all teams I considered for the list. The first team I have in my top 10 is TCU. South Carolina completely embarrassed them in their head-to-head matchup, but I think they have shown enough to be considered a top 10 team. They are 12-1 with 2 of their wins being against Notre Dame and NC State. Their team is mostly built through the transfer portal, and it's been working out pretty well for them. Their big three of Haley Van Lith, Sedona Prince, and Madison Connor are combining for over 50 points per game. They also have a deep rotation to complement them. With Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12, TCU is going to completely dominate their conference. With how disappointing Iowa State has been, Kansas State is the only team I can see giving them real problems in their conference. I've been very impressed from what I've seen from Kentucky this year. To say hiring Kenny Brooks was a great move is an understatement. Georgia Amoore has been a key piece to Brooks' quick success at Kentucky, but the other players are just as important. Tiani Key is having a career year after transferring away from North Carolina. Clara Strack has proven to be the perfect replacement for Kitley. Deja Lawrence and Amelia Hassett have proven to be major steals from the transfer portal. They are proof that coaches should look a lot harder at mid-major players. What impresses me the most about this team is how well they work together as a team. Despite being made of mostly transfers, they are 7th in assists per game and lead in the country in blocks. They had a blunder against North Carolina, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because it was early in the season where the team was still figuring each other out. Georgia Amoore was also in a massive shooting slump, which she appears to be out of now. If she keeps playing the way she's played the last 4 games, not only do I think Kentucky will be a top 10 team, she's firmly going to be back into first-round consideration. I'm not even going to lie to y'all, I'm really nervous about putting Maryland here. They have a brutal stretch coming up, and I could very easily see them dropping at least 3 games this month. But Brenda Frese has consistently had top 10 to top 15 level teams. Last year was an outlier in how much they struggled, but outside of that, they have been a higher level Big Ten team the past several years. This is a big reason why I have faith in them, even with their only signature win currently being over Duke. Brenda Frese is exceptional at maximizing non-All-American level talent. She added ex-UConn players Amari DeBerry and Saylor Poffenberger, along with some mid-major and JUCO transfers. Cheyenne Sellers continues to play herself into draft consideration, and Kayleen Schmeichel has proven to be a lethal shooter. It's an unconventional approach to build a team, but it has clearly worked. This is not a team people want to see in the tournament, regardless of seed. I went back and forth between UConn and LSU for the 7th spot. I gave UConn the edge over them because they have played a much tougher schedule, but LSU is not a team that anyone should be taking lightly. As long as Kim Mulkey is coaching and they are able to pull in elite talent, they're going to be a title contender. Flau'jae Johnson is undoubtedly a top 5 player in college basketball right now. She had a dominant tournament run last year, and she's picking up right where she left off. And when you pair her up with Kaylin Gilbert and Michaela Williams, you got a disgusting backcourt. If that wasn't enough, you have Anissa Morrow, who is a double-double machine. LSU has a 4-headed monster and has plenty of talented underclassmen they are developing in the process. And even though I'm not a fan of LSU's soft out-of-conference scheduling either, it's not like they're the only ones doing it. Ohio State and Oklahoma had even weaker schedules than LSU, and they are considered top 10 teams in the AP poll. The SEC is in the deepest conference this year, and I can't see LSU falling any shorter than number 3, which is why I have them being one of the best teams in the country. At number 6, I'm going with UConn. The duo of Sarah Strong and Paige Beckers has been nothing short of spectacular. They routinely combine for over 40 points while making great passes and playing really good defense. They are both players that I think will be AP All-Americans this year. If there's one thing UConn has been good at, it's taking care of business. If there's one thing UConn has been good at, it's taking care of business. In all their victories, they have beaten their teams by double digits. But one thing that concerns me about this team is how top-heavy they are. Sarah and Paige are the team leaders in almost every statistical category. A big selling point about this year's UConn team is their depth. But in the biggest games, it's on Paige and Sarah's shoulders to do everything. The fact that only 2 players on the University of Connecticut are averaging double digits in points is ridiculous. The non-Sarah and Paige players need to step up more consistently if they are to make a serious title run. UConn fans will point to the fact they made the Final Four last year despite their early season struggles. But they were also fortunate enough to not rematch any of the teams they lost to in the tournament. The first team that cracks my top 5 is Texas. Last year they had an amazing run. They had a great story and were fun to root for. But deep down we all knew they were only going to get so far without their star point guard. But now she's back. Texas beating Oklahoma is huge for me because they lacked a signature win. Their biggest claim to fame was taking Notre Dame to overtime. That's great, but that's not enough to be considered a top 5 team. But taking down Oklahoma is the start of a soon-to-be great conference season. Texas moving to the SEC is very fitting because they play a SEC brand of basketball anyway. An athletic team that's not very good from 3, but is great scoring in the mid-range area and will play physical on both sides of the ball. Vic Schaefer ran very successful Mississippi State program, so there's going to be little to no difficulties in Texas adjusting to their new conference. Admittedly, Madison Booker isn't taking the leap I thought she would this year, but Texas is a deep team that doesn't rely on one particular player. They run a rotation of 7 to 10 players, depending on the quality of the opponent. This allows them to maintain their gritty, high-intensity play style, with little drop-off in production. What makes Texas scary is that Rory Harmon is shooting notably worse than she was the year before, along with Layla Felia. I don't expect that to last all season. Once they both get back to 100%, Texas is going to be even more of a force than they already were. I had a lot of questions about USC after they struggled against Ole Miss and got cooked by Notre Dame. But the UConn game proved they are still a title-contending team. Even though it would be ideal for more players to step up, it's clear the duo of Juju Watkins and Kiki Iriafen is too much for teams to deal with. Juju is one of those players where as long as she's on your team, you can beat anyone. Outside of Hidalgo, there is not a player I would rather have on my team. She's at the top of everyone's scouting report, and teams still can't stop her. But more often than not, she'll shut down whoever her guard matchup is. Kiki isn't putting up the crazy numbers she was at Stanford, but it doesn't change the fact USC is a lot better with her than they would be without. I sound like a broken record, but this continues to be an issue. Kaylee Heckle and TVO have to play better. Bare minimum, at least one of the two. ESPN has USC ranked as the #1 recruiting class in the country, but right now, it sure doesn't look like it. Lindsay Gottlieb is going to have to trust her freshmen more if they are going to beat UCLA in conference play and if they want to beat a team like Notre Dame or South Carolina. But even with their flaws, they are a team I'm confident can make a Final Four run. The #3 spot is exactly where I had Notre Dame before the preseason, and I feel just as strongly about it. People understandably had doubts after the TCU and Utah game, but I never wavered. If teams think those 2 losses are somehow going to save them from Notre Dame, they got another thing coming. It goes without saying that Olivia Miles, Hidalgo, and Citron are the best guard trio in the country. It's straight up unfair. There's a real possibility all 3 of these players are going to be lottery picks in the WNBA draft. Bare minimum, they are all going in the first round. What separates this team from years past is the massive upgrades that were made in the front court. Getting Kate Caval from this year's recruiting class and getting Liatu King and Liz Carlin from the transfer portal has completely changed the trajectory of this team. When Westbeld comes back, Notre Dame will have the best front court in the ACC, which is a sentence I never thought I would be able to say. I'm not the biggest fan of the term super team, but if anyone fits that description, it's Notre Dame. They have 5 or 6 players that would be the best players for several Power 4 schools. The biggest obstacle for this team is staying healthy. The fact that Notre Dame had added multiple walk-ons the last few weeks is a bit concerning. But if all the major pieces are able to play, the sky's the limit. South Carolina had a shocking loss to UCLA, and they have been on an absolute tear ever since. It's very clear that just because UCLA beat them doesn't mean other people can. They have completely mowed down teams, including a really good TCU and Duke team. South Carolina essentially has 2 starting lineups, they run a 10-woman rotation, and their bench almost averages 50 points per game. The SEC is much deeper than it was last year, so it's hard for me to say they don't lose a single conference game again. But I have zero doubts they will win the SEC, both in the regular season and the SEC tournament. The one concern I have with South Carolina is they don't have a true number one option, like Aaliyah Boston or Camila Cardoso, a player they can constantly rely on every game to be virtually unguardable. I think Joyce Edwards and Fo Wiley can get to that point, but they need more time. This won't matter in the vast majority of games they play, but when they play the best teams in the country, it could hurt. Regardless, this is a team no one wants to see on their side of the bracket in March. UCLA was the biggest riser out of any team in the preseason. I had them at number 6, but now I have them as the best team in women's college basketball. I never questioned the immense level of talent they have, but I had reservations on whether or not Corey Close would be able to use it effectively. So far, she has. Something about this team feels different. I think if this year's UCLA team was able to play the last year's version of themselves, they would win by 30. That's how much better they have gotten. Lauren Betts went from a great player last year to a National Player of the Year candidate. Corey Close needs to write Tara Vanderveer a thank you letter for fumbling Lauren Betts. It completely changed the trajectory of UCLA as a program. I've talked non-stop about how valuable Lauren is in previous videos, but she's not the only one. This team is loaded with talent pretty much everywhere. They have some of the best floor generals in college in Kiki Rice and Alina Arnesaulo. As long as they keep improving on their game, they will be first-round picks in the draft when they're eligible. Then you have Janiyah Barker, who has proven to be the perfect role player. She sacrificed being the main focal point of the offense at Texas A&M, and it's going to be rewarded with team success and draft consideration. Tamea Gardner was absolutely on fire at the start of the season, but is in a slump right now. I'm afraid to see what this team will look like once she gets hot again. There's plenty of other players I haven't even gotten to, such as London Jones, Gabriella Hawkes, and Angela Dugalish. Simply put, this team is loaded. If UCLA won against South Carolina but the game was closer, I would still have South Carolina as the number one team because their out-of-conference resume is so much stronger. But the game wasn't even close, which makes me very hard for me to do that. I'll briefly go over the teams that I dropped out of my top 10 in the preseason. I grossly overestimated the impact the new additions to Iowa State would have. I also expected Addie Brown to look a lot better this year. I had worries about NC State's post-play even before the season started, but it's hurting them even more than I thought it would. I still consider Duke a great team, but they are too inconsistent. They can compete and potentially beat any team in the country, but also lose to anyone. For the most part, I have teams in a very similar spot that I did in the preseason, which makes me very satisfied with my preseason predictions. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I appreciated everyone who took the time to watch it. I'll see you later.